and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 158. If you're looking to improve your understanding of photography, then you've come to the right place. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you click like. And if you happen to be watching live as we're recording and going out on this, then leave a comment. Let me know who you are, where you're from, what the weather's like. And if you have any questions as we go, then, make sure you leave them too. Get the chat going. Always nice to have get the conversation flowing in these podcasts. Otherwise, if you happen to be watching this on the recorded version, we have this and 157 other episodes all sitting here on my YouTube channel. Then plenty to go back and trawl through the archives. So stick with us. So yes, and welcome back to welcome back, or welcome for the first time if this is your first time here. Yes, so today we're going to be talking about some photos I did in a hair salon where I teamed up once again with Circle Vintage and Nelson Brown Hairdressing. We had a couple of models, Chelsea and Vanessa, and we did some quite fun shoots. Went a little bit kind of Wes Anderson again. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Also, I've had somebody send in, John Smith has also sent in a picture for a bit of feedback and critique. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. Meanwhile, I can see we have some comments in already. Roberts here says, howdy all from a very hot Texas. April says, hello everyone from a sunny and warm day in Long Island, New York. Nadia says, hi from a very wet Fife. Pat says, weather here a bit iffy in Minehead. Hello everybody. Meg says, hi everyone. Maggie says, hello from a grey and damp Castle Douglas. Sandra says, hello everyone from a sunny Birmingham. John says, hi from a sunny Sussex. Sorry, no, sunny Essex. Not Sussex, sunny Essex. And Stacey says, good morning. After chilly days and rain, the sun is out temporarily with chances of thunderstorms, but in the 80s today. That's pretty good. John says, hello from Ohio, waiting for it to rain today. And it's a strange thing that sometimes when we're doing these, you get the weather is almost universal wherever anybody is in the world. Everybody's talking about it being a bit damp and chilly. Today it seems completely different. All depends whereabouts you are. Sandra's saying, can you send down some of that rain from Scotland? You're more than welcome to it. I think we are possibly due thunderstorms this afternoon, so if I do suddenly cut out, it may be that a bolt of lightning hit one of the routers or power cables somewhere along the line. Hopefully that's not likely to happen. John says, first topic of conversation anywhere. Well, it is if you happen to be, certainly if you're UK based. It's the first topic of conversation for almost anybody in Britain because the weather is so variable. I think if you're in California, it probably isn't. It's just the same weather all the time. So probably, or maybe if you're in the desert somewhere. But yes, certainly here in the UK, and it's usually about either it's too hot or it's too wet or it's too cold. So where are we? Yes, before we get too distracted by the weather, let's talk about photography. Yes, so what I'm going to talk about today is a set of photos I did recently. Some of you, if you've been taking a look at the little card introducing this topic, or the banner for the event page on Facebook, then you might have seen this photo. So what happened here was I was discussing with Circle Vintage, who I have done various collaborations with before, so quite a few of these that I've talked about. And one of the things that came up was Marie was talking about she had these vintage bridal dresses that she was looking to publicise, and she's kind of got a collection of them. And we started thinking about bouncing ideas about what we could do with that. And then the idea came up with a hair salon, but kind of going for a slightly more vintage look hair salon, where you have like those hooded hairdryer things coming down. Now, Nelson Brown, the hairdresser that we usually team up with, and we teamed up with on this occasion to do the hair as well, his salon doesn't have those hooded dryers. So we looked around, and we found, and Marie happened to know someone else in Dumfries, BJ's, the hair salon in Dumfries, and they have a couple of these. So, and she chatted with them, and they were more than happy to actually let us use the space. So that's what we did. So let me show you the photo then, and I'll, or the key. So I took a few, but what I'll do is I'll show you first of all the main one that I'm talking about, and this kind of carrying on from this notion of this, you know, very kind of cinematic. I'm definitely going more cinematic, and in fact, next week I'm going to really go more in depth about that notion of doing cinematic photography, but I'll talk about that later. Make sure you stick around for it, because I'll also be setting challenge. Aha, yes. So stick around for that. I'll talk more about that later. Meanwhile, back to this one, and if you think about the, you know, what was that? A couple of weeks ago, I was talking about going all Wes Anderson with this photo, and that notion that there's a particular director called Wes Anderson, and he's got a very distinctive style, and that if you use enough of the tropes and styles that he uses, then your photos end up having that same kind of mood and feel. Much like in the way that we talked before about paint. If you want to do a painterly style, if you want to emulate that kind of 17th century old masters feel, then what you do is you make sure that you've got the lighting that emulates that style. You make sure that you've got the kind of compositions, the kind of materials, the kind of props, and that if you do all these and sort of lay them out in the right way, then when you take your photo, that photo will have everybody immediately going, oh, that looks like a painting. So this kind of photography then is also about this idea of going, oh, that looks a bit like a Wes Anderson style image. And the point with Wes Anderson is some of the tropes that he uses is, first of all, he always looks flat on, kind of a 90 degrees straight onto the image, rather than, doesn't tend to do funny angles and what have you. Not for the most part. Then he tends to have all the action happen right in the middle of the screen. Colour palette, he often uses these sort of slightly oversaturated pastel colours, and of course you'll then have a sort of slightly more wider screen cinematic crop to it. And when you put all these together, you end up with, and especially if you can introduce a sort of very slightly quirky sense of humour to it or anything like that, then you tend to find you've got this kind of Wes Anderson style image. So we go back to this, and this is using the same tropes. So what we have here is we have our main characters are sitting in the middle of the screen. That's where it's all happening. We've got these kind of oversaturated pastel colours. We've got everything happening on a kind of flat level. You're looking, 90 degrees onto the action. And consequently, you end up with that same kind of feel to it. And it was a lot of fun doing this shoot. And so you can see we've got the dresses. We've got Vanessa on the left here with her bright red hair. And Chelsea on the right. And Chelsea now has appeared in several of the photo shoots, and she looks different every single time. In fact, Vanessa was also in the one that Vanessa and Chelsea were both in the ones that I was talking about last week in the White Cube, which was another collaboration I did with Nelson Brown Hairdressing and Circle Vintage. So, as part of the kind of overarching project called Redress, we created a new magazine called Pulp. And these photos here were part of that photo shoot for that. And I'll show you another one we did, variation on this one here, was this, where we've got, so I think Maria had this idea of eating a pink donut, was always part of it. So we did this version of it. And these XL crisps, cheese crisps is what I meant to say, very much a thing that you tend to get in Scotland, or even particularly border Scotland. Cumbria, they're very, very popular, and certainly around here they're very, very popular. Around the rest of Britain, most people don't seem to have heard of them. But again, a kind of just a quirky little nailing it to this point. So these were the images here that we set up for that. However, having said that, it wasn't as straightforward as put the lights in place and go, because the colour scheme of this wasn't like this at all. It was a very different colour. So let me show you, actually let me just hold on one sec. Just checking if there was any other bits of comments in here. Oh, actually just Pat talking about Woody here seems to have taken up the football. I guess that is. Okay, so let's go back then. So what was I talking about? So if we flip back here, yes, so to what I'll do, I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to take you through, talk you a little bit more about how I set it up and some kind of behind the scenes, give you a sense of what was going on there. And then I'm also going to take you through the layers that I did in Photoshop, because the first thing to know, if I show you the test shot where Meg was with us, and so I got Meg to sit there while the models are getting their hair done and all this kind of stuff, I need to get things set up. So you can see I put a big softbox up on the left here is coming down, and that was my first light. We've got Meg sitting here. Now, some of the more astute of you may have noticed that the walls are a different colour and that the floor is a different colour, as well as the fact that there is this towel rack sitting on the top as well. So, oh, that's the wrong one. I'll come back to that one afterwards. But if we go essentially same kind of angle, different lighting, but you can see then that this has a very different kind of feel to it. We've also, the desk here is pine, kind of orange pine rather than painted black. So you can start to see that there's quite a lot of work went into this. So with this one here, I put in my initial light, and what we've got is we've just got a single light source, you've got the shadows down on the right side. Any light that's bouncing off the mirror isn't really doing a great deal of lighting up. But the other thing about this kind of shot was the fact that I wanted a kind of all-round light. I wasn't really playing with harsh shadows at all. So then what I did was I got another flash, and I put it in over on by the sink here and bounced it into the mirror. And then that bounced the whole pile of light coming back to the point whereby you can actually see the shadows coming up here off the towel rack. Or actually, if you follow the line backwards, you can see that will be coming from where it's bouncing off the mirror over here. And it's actually overpowering even the softbox, which is closer to it. So that gives you a sense. So when we then put the brides into it, this then is our initial shot. This is so this is what the unedited version looks like. So that's the unedited version, and let's go back to this one, and this is the edited version. So you can see that there's quite a bit of difference, and the point that I want to go to here, or another point I just want to bring up, which is a not uncommon thing for me to talk about, which is, for me, very often, that the point you go click isn't the end of photography. The point that you go click is one part along the path of getting the photograph, particularly when you're doing narrative staged photography, and the photography has a purpose. There is an editing process. Now, sometimes that editing might be minimal. Sometimes that editing might be quite dramatic, or complex, or there might be an awful lot of stuff going on in it. But editing always happens. You don't tend to do the photo straight out of the camera. The photo straight out of the camera is a starting point. Well, in a way, it's a part way through. It's like everything that's gone into this point, everything that went into finding the venue, getting the models, getting the outfits, the hairdresser doing all the hair, the makeup artist, in this case Angela, was doing all the makeup. Even getting hold of the donuts, getting hold of a vintage magazine for Vanessa to be reading while I'm sitting in there. All these things are happening in preparation to get to the point whereby I can then take the photo. Then I've got to work out the lighting and all this to make sure, and then we play with poses, we play with the sort of structure, moving things about, like these little kind of strange tree bush things, which, to be honest, I hadn't even overly clocked were there. I think Dan moved them into place. And all this lot then goes to the point. And then finally I take the photos and I get to the point, and this is one of multiple photos that I took where I was closer in, further back out, where they were in different positions. And ultimately we get to this point whereby, of all the photos that I took that day, this one was my favourite. This one where, we'd seen the one where this one was working up until the other one. This one I liked, that they both seemed to be in their own little worlds. But once we got to that, there was a bit where I said, well, okay, look, stick your leg over. Let's actually have a little bit more interaction here. So Chelsea's placed her leg across Vanessa's leg. And then there was the notion, somebody said, well, look, feed her the donut. And then I said, well, look, look away, look like, just look in a different direction. And this combination got us to a point whereby I'm then thinking, yes, I like that. And when I came back to look at it on the computer and I was working through all the photos I'd taken, in the end, this is the one that I go, yes, I think I can do the most with it. At this point, though, I didn't know fully what I was going to be doing with it. I knew that this towel rack would have to go. That would get in the way. I knew, obviously, I would need to be removing where the lights are. You can see over here in this one, where I've got the off-camera flash, is then pointing up into the mirror, which is then bouncing this light back across here. So this then is as far as it goes with going click. Okay, now there's other shots I went on to do, but where this photo is concerned, this was where we got to. And in and of itself, I'm sure there's plenty of photographers who, if they just had that, would still feel quite pleased with what they got. You would just crop out this bit at the end here, where you've got the light and the crisps, and you would crop out this bit where you've got the light going on, and maybe straighten it a little bit. So that's where I got to with that. Then the next thing to do was to take it into Photoshop. I've got a comment here. Sandra says, seeing the test shots is really helpful as it shows the importance of editing in Photoshop, but also the time taken to create a unique photo. Yeah, I'm glad you're right there. It's kind of why I wanted to show you these things. This is called Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, not just looking at nice photos with Kim Ayres. The understanding comes from how to create something like this, and I think so often I'm up against people who they see my photo, and because we're so used to having these things here where we just pull out the camera, we take our image, we go click, and we go, that's not right, change it a bit, click, click, 3 clicks, and we've got the picture we want, that we tend to kind of have this sense that when we look at other people's photos, that is being done fairly quickly. But it isn't. These kind of stage photos take a lot of time. I mean, this is, it's why I'm kind of mentioning the amount of preparation that goes into it. The meetings beforehand, the discussion of ideas, the bouncing of ideas. With some people, when I'm creating ideas, we will have a Pinterest board and we will do a mood board. There can be all sorts of delays and problems about trying to find venues or trying to get permission or to find a time when it's empty, when other people are available. And when you've got a team of people, and you've got a hairdresser, and you've got models, and you've got stylists and makeup artists, as well as photographer and photographer's assistant or whatever, to get everybody available at the same time takes a lot of time as well. So it's a far cry from just turn up and go click. So what I want to do now then is I will show you the Photoshop sequence that I went through. So basically then I've imported the picture into Photoshop, and the first thing I need to do is tilt it and straighten it up. At this point as well, I think that this version I've cropped out as far as getting that light out, just in there. So I then straighten it up more or less. For those who can see a little line on the edge, that's because later on I straightened it just a fraction more. But what I did here was so we've got it straight, and I've done that bit whereby I've grabbed the edges and pulled them out again, because there was a slight bit of distortion as well. If you can see here, over on the left, this looks fairly straight. The edge here is starting to tilt to the left a bit, but it's tilted quite a lot to the right the further we go over. And this is because this was not a big space. This was a really small salon, and I'm quite far back, and I've got my camera. I'm using a 24-70 lens, but I've got it on probably 24, and I'm quite wide back, and I'm trying to fit it as much as I can, but because I'm going a bit wide angle, it's distorting around the edges. So part of straightening this up is also then pulling the tops or the bottoms and edging it out a bit, as you will have seen me do before, and then that way I'm kind of getting sort of straight verticals. This is really what it's about, is to make sure that each of the verticals is properly vertical and not starting to lean out in this case. Then there was the case of doing the walls, and selecting the walls. You can do the main bit of the wall quite easily. It then gets more complicated when you get round like the edge of hair, or you get the edge of this these little trees, or even where the wires hang down off the hairdryer, and it's not necessarily very straightforward. So what I did here, in fact, actually the first thing I did was I initially did these walls pink. So what I've done with this is I've got a block colour. If I do that as normal, you can see that I've got a block colour here. In fact, I'll tell you what, first of all, I disable the mask. I've gone for this kind of coral pink. Enable the mask. So I've then gone around, I've masked it all, I've got like that, and then I've created I've gone to all these different kind of ways you can interact the layers, and what I've done is I've gone to colour, and that then has coloured up the wall, but it's kept the light and dark, so we've still got the shadows within it, and that becomes an important part of it, so that it looks natural. Because as you can see, if we just had it at normal, it just looks weird. It looks like they're sort of sitting in a TV studio with a painted wall. Doesn't quite look right. So you have to getting the right interaction meant that I put that to colour. So now what I've managed to do is I've managed to go from a magnolia wall to a pink wall. And that was always my idea. My initial idea was always, I thought I was going to be going for a pink wall, but when I did, it just didn't quite fit with Vanessa's hair. Vanessa's bright red hair just meant that there wasn't that kind of clash in a way that I wanted. So what I did was I created an extra hue saturation layer, and from that you can go to the pink and then you can sort of slide it along. So if we wanted, we could have gone for a more yellow, kind of green, and we ended up with this kind of teal. If I swing it over this, so I could have just as easily gone for kind of lilac, purple, magenta, and moved it around. And I did, I sort of played it around, but in the end actually the complete opposite end, a full 180 degree turn on the colour wheel away from the pink, was this teal. And that when I did that, suddenly Vanessa's hair absolutely popped, and I thought, yes, that's where I need to be. So once I've got that, the next bit I need is the floor. And so because the floor is just a kind of dull brown, so I decided to go for that same colour pink with the floor. But again, if I'd wanted, I could have changed that to green, blue, and you can play around. Once you've selected it, because you're doing it on a separate layer, you can sort of move it around to wherever you want. But for me, actually having, so again, here I'm matching up with the walls, but by having it back to that very same pink that I wanted in the first place, it allowed for that nice colour contrast that you're getting. Having done that, there was also the fact that this orange pine, this brown pine, didn't look particularly good, nor did I really like that little maroon bit of the the seat behind. So the next thing to do was, I thought, we've got this black vinyl covering here on the sink unit. Let's make it black to balance it out here, and I'll make that black as well. And then what I'll also do is we'll just boost the colour on those trees a little bit. You might notice they're a little bit grey, and I just kind of up the saturation a little bit into the greens on that. But what, again, with the colour on the desk and the chair here, it's a case of using, I'm changing the colour, but I'm not change it, and so I've desaturated it and I've made it darker. So you can see I've taken the saturation down, but I've not gone so dark that it's just become completely black. I've dropped the lightness down so that we can still see the grain in the wood, and then that way it's got that kind of, it's been so you've got that so it looks more like a kind of a black varnish as such, and that felt important to kind of have that. Once I've got all these bits and pieces, finally I can put it together and do the last bits of making sure I've got the right kind of saturation adjustments and clarity and texture levels. And then this then is my kind of final sort of Photoshop level, the image. However, at this point we've got quite a lot of room on the top, and it's a case of I want to create a sort of slightly more cinematic look to it. So what I did was I created a little sheet which was 1000 pixels high by 1851 wide, so a ratio of 1 to 1851 or 1/8, yeah, something like that. I will talk actually in more detail about this next week, but what that allowed me to do is if I hit Control, not on that one, Control T on this, I can then, because this has got a very specific ratio, if I pull this over to here and then pull it over to here, that's giving me my cinematic ratio. Then if I desaturate that a bit, I can see where it's going to fall. Now if I have it completely in the middle, I'm going to lose a little bit of the bottom of the foot here. So I can drag that down and then just find the right place where I want. So it's got about the same distance between the toe and the bottom here and the top of the hairdryer and that bit there. Then having got that, I can now go to my crop, line it up with that, and then remove that again. And now we have our very cinematic, and there we go. So that then is what I'm doing with the Photoshop, is to make sure you're straightening it, you're getting all the layers right, you're getting the colors right, and then ultimately you're getting your crop right. That then should hopefully give you some kind of sense of what's going on with that. So I can see we've got a few comments. John says pre-planning a shoot is something I need to work on. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things with shooting that I've talked before about the notion of almost like the difference between scavenging, hunting and farming. And scavenging is what we all do. We happen to be out with the camera, we're not really maybe looking, and suddenly we spot something. It just happens to be there, we grab our camera, we go click, right? And sometimes we get lucky, you know. We weren't necessarily out looking for whatever it was we were looking for, we just happened to come across it. So in that kind of scavenging, like, you know, bird coming across a carcass, it's already there. You just happen to have got lucky. Hunting is where you have a specific idea in mind and you're going out to you're going out to find it. So in that case, it might be you are after photographing that squirrel, you are after photographing that sunset. You head out prepared and you're seeking it and you're moving into the right place, you're moving into the right position, you're waiting for the right conditions in order to be able to hunt down the photo that you're looking for. Farming is where you are planting the seeds and the crops in advance. You're putting all the elements in place ahead of time so that when the right time comes, you've got everything where you want it, and then, well, you're still kind of hunting a little bit because you're playing until you get what you want. But it's all about the notion of planning. So there's the difference between saying, nice day today, I've got my camera, don't have anything else to do, what shall I do? Let's go off to this lake, this wood, this castle, this street, and see what I can get. Or saying in advance, I'm really after this particular kind of photo. What do I need to put in place to make that photo happen? And that's what the planning bit is all about. And a lot of the kind of photography that I do is all about that kind of planning. I mean, yeah, of course, I'll go out and I'll take a photo of a fern that will happen to be uncurling, or I'll wander into the garden and there's a nice bee buzzing around a foxglove, I'll have a go at shooting it. But if we're talking about the kind of stuff where I build my reputation, I make my money, I put out on my portfolio on my website, this kind of pre-planning is really important. Yeah, John says, being a novice, I'm struggling with your use of layers, and your screen thumbnail is obscuring some of them. Yeah, well, okay, that's fair enough. Yes, I know my little bit up in the top corner is, but at this point, what I'm showing you is not really a full-on step-by-step. I mean, don't try and copy exactly what I'm doing. I'm trying to give you a general sense of what's going on, to understand that there are layers, to understand that you can use sliders, and it's at this point, it's an approach. And you don't need to kind of take my, I'm not doing one of those, here's the raw file, here's the step-by-step instructions, here's the finished image, now work along with me. There are plenty of courses out there that do that. My idea at this point is to just kind of give you a general sense of what's going on. Hope that makes sense. Sandra says, how long did you take to create the mask? And what was the total time you spent in Photoshop? To be honest, I have absolutely no idea. There's a point whereby when I get into Photoshop and I'm at that level, I shove on my playlist and shut the study door, and I just zone into it, and I'm there for as long as I need to be. If I'm lucky, I go, and the selection tools, which have increased massively in their brilliance at selecting the bit I want them to select. Sometimes you can select an area and it selects it very, very quickly. Sometimes it doesn't, and you end up spending a lot of time. And to be honest, I genuinely don't know. It might be 5 minutes, it might be 3 hours. There's a sort of sense of loss. And at this point, I don't have a timer. I don't have a timesheet whereby I'm saying, right, okay, well, I've clicked off this number of hours doing the masking, this number of hours doing the color shifts. What I'm after is I'm getting that photo right, however long it takes me to get right, till I get to a point whereby I can sit back and go, yes, I'm satisfied with that. You have to be slightly careful about being a perfectionist, because obviously we can never absolutely obtain perfection. You have to reach a point where you go, I'm satisfied enough with that. But at the same time, there are certain things that if I don't do them, if I do less than I feel that I could have, every time I look at that photo, I'll notice the bit that I didn't really do, and it will irk me. Don't use that word irk very often, but it will irk me. It's a good word for that. So yeah, as long as I need to, really. April says that I think Photoshop is so difficult. I tried to go to YouTube and they explain things too fast. I cannot tell you how many times I went back, but I gave up. It was too hard. I need in-person lessons. Well, that's another option. Now, I do have a handful of clients who I give private tuition to, where via Zoom or what have you, we talk through photography there and zero very specifically on their photos, their style, and adopt it to them. And with some of those, I've also done one-on-one tuition. If it's something you're genuinely interested in, give me a contact. We can chat about it. So yeah, there's an option. The other thing is actually on YouTube, you can have a different playback speed as well. Have you noticed that? If you go and click on the little settings bar, there's an option to change your playback speed, and you can change it to, you can increase the speed. Sometimes I'm playing it back at 1.5 or 1.75, so nearly double speed, just because I get too impatient at how long somebody's taking to tell me something. But you can actually drop it down to half speed, so that they're going at a slower pace. And don't forget, of course, you can always pause and rewind and go back. So you might find that one useful. Sandra says, I know exactly what you mean, April. I've taken ages to learn how to use Photoshop elements. The other thing is to pick and find the people who you resonate with. There are some YouTubers out there who, doesn't matter how experienced they are, there's something that doesn't gel with me. Either the rhythm is wrong, they're too fast, they're too slow, they don't explain in a way that's useful to me. There's other ones where once I've found them, I subscribe to their channel, and then they're the ones tend to be my first port of call. One very good one is PixPerfect, I think it is. Guy from, I think, probably India. He's very, very good, very clear, warm, friendly, really explains things well, breaks things down nicely. Certainly worth checking out. Right, okay, April and Sandra are now having a little chat in there. So let's go back then. And what I will say is, where are we at? So that then gives you a sense of where I was at. Now, I did a couple of other photos. I'll just show you from the same session. What we've done is, at this point, we've been shooting straight on. Now, if I go to here, you can see that we've got a sort of just slightly different sense of the Salon here. These are the bits where I've been shooting in this direction from. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of see what it would be like to shoot into the corner. And so what I did here was we had decided to use the mirrors. Now these, while I'm using the same colour schemes, and I will say now that actually changing the walls to the same colour blue here was an absolute nightmare in terms of masking, because we're talking hair. And once you start introducing hair into it, it becomes a whole different level of not quite getting the pixels colour shifted the right way. However, it felt worth doing it. Now, so these ones are less Wes Anderson. They're not sort of straight on. I'm not going for that. But these were just interesting styles and shapes that I wanted to go with. And this notion then that we've got the two of each of the two brides, and you're seeing the back of the head and the side of the head on this side of the mirror, but then you're seeing face in the mirror, gave it a very different kind of feel. So let me just move that over there. So here you can see, you know, quite a different mood. And then we did another one here where we had them linking arms, looking into the camera. I'm slightly lower. This is sort of getting a sort of slightly weirder kind of, again, it's not Wes Anderson style. This, we're sort of starting to move into David Lynch territory, I think. And again, problems with the colouring of the walls to get the hair, but you know, I stuck with it for as long as I needed to in order to get that with the colour scheme. So very different kind of photo. Another kind of photo we did was I did this one. I just wanted to do a fair straight on headshot, and actually for the Pulp magazine that we did with through Redress, this one ended up being used as a cover. And part of this photo is that idea of, you can see this quite easily as a magazine cover, just cropped in slightly, title across the top here, and it's got that kind of perfect feel to it. And then messing around, some of you may have seen this one on Instagram already. If you've got donuts, how can you not do? Somebody is going to pick up the donuts and pretend they're eyes, and this was just a whole load of fun. This was following on from, they'd been doing a bit of dancing we tried doing some shots of the brides dancing. Chelsea was throwing her hair all over the place. The hair started coming out quite wildly. It was looking quite fun, but in the end we didn't use any of those photos for the to edit up. But while her hair's starting to go out, this just kind of felt like a fun shoot. So I edited this up in the same way, doing the blue background, same colour scheme. And then I cropped in for this to do that kind of square Instagram version, which also works quite well. And then there was another point where I started playing, and I thought, you know, there's something about this which has almost got a kind of pseudo horror film to it. What if I do it in black and white? And so I played around with that kind of almost 1930s, 1940s old horror film, you know, Frankenstein, Bride of Dracula kind of idea, and that just seemed like a bit of fun. So you know, that so there's a number of different ways you can always go with your photography, and how you decide to edit it can make a huge difference as to how it will come across. Right, what have we got? Oh, Sandra says, can you put that PixPerfect link into chat, please? Not right at the moment. If I do that, I'll go off and I'll spend ages looking for it. I tell you what, remind me in the right, for anybody who's forgotten, we have a Facebook group, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, and we can do a lot of communication in there. So stick a little line in the Facebook group saying, can you, and I'll get a notification, I'll remember, and then I can put the link to you for that. April says, I'll also check him out. Robert says, Anne and I also like Courtney Victoria channel on YouTube. And for Bird and Canon R5, Simon D'Entremont. Okay, well, this is maybe a good excuse then. But if somebody wants to set up in the Understanding Photography Facebook page a post saying useful YouTube channels for editing, then everybody can sort of put into the comments if they've got a YouTube channel that they like following, they found particularly useful. They can leave a link to it and say what that speciality is. Obviously, there's no point in leaving a Photoshop tutorial and not saying it's Photoshop if somebody else is using Affinity, for example, or the difference between Photoshop main and Photoshop elements. Okay, where are we? April says, love the creativity, Kim. Thank you. Robert says, the creature with the donut eyes. Yes, it's... oh, Robert has actually put the Pix Imperfect, not Pix Perfect. Okay, great. So he's put that link in the comments here. But I still think it's a good idea. Go and play with the Facebook group too. Okay, right. Well, what I'll also do, let me show you a couple of behind the scenes photos as well, just to give you a little bit more sense of what was going on with the salon. So here you can see that, you know, we've taken everything's been crushed up to one side so that we can get a better sense of. In fact, actually, let me just go back. I just wanted to show, where are we? No, okay, so there was that, and yeah, so there was that, and yeah, this here is that other shot, which is the unedited version of this one, just to show you that. But we see we're shooting into the corner here. As we kind of swing round, so my initial shot when I was shooting into the corner, with that corner with the seats is to the left of Vanessa over here. I was standing where the softbox now is. In that second shot where we're shooting into the mirrors, I've moved the softbox over to here, and I've got a flash on a stool bouncing that way to light that in a different way. So this is being lit in a different way to the first one. So this is more or less the setup. You can now see in the mirror here, we've got Meg, who is doing some behind the scenes photography for us. We've got mirrors all over the place. But you can also see Chelsea is here getting her hair done. We've got Dan and Marie from Circle Vintage, Nelson and Mark from Nelson Brown Hair Education, and Angela, who did the makeup, is kind of hidden behind Nelson from this angle. But you can start to see that actually this is quite a small space. You know, there's this thing that's sometimes said about photography. Photography is 1% inspiration, 99% moving furniture. It certainly feels like that in my case a lot of the time. But to show you some of the behind the scenes photos, you will have seen some of these before, but these ones were taken by Meg. So Meg had the camera. She took this one of Dan. You may remember, some of you may remember a few weeks ago I was showing how you could edit these and take what was a fairly noisy, high ISO, not a great colour scheme. You know, it was under the kind of dull yellow lights and the light wasn't great, and by converting it into black and white, playing with the contrast a bit, you can actually create quite a cool photo. This was another one of Meg's as well. You can see Dan standing in the background while the hairdressers are getting on with Vanessa. There's nice shapes to that. Is a closer up one of Vanessa getting her hair done, which I think it's got quite a kind of strong feel to it. This here, where I'm trying a straight on test shot with Vanessa, she's looking straight into my camera. You can then see my reflection going on here, while you can see Mark in the background getting ready to do. We're probably playing with the hairdryer to Chelsea, who will be sitting over on my right. Kind of nice little action shot going on there. Here's Chelsea getting ready, and then Marie has got her phone up because she's busy taking photos of Chelsea. Now Chelsea's hair is all done. Some of you might remember this photo that I put Meg put into the Reflections Challenge, which I must admit I really love this one. And so we've got the back of Chelsea's head. This is when she's getting her hair done. We can see Meg take it. So we've got the back of her head here, her reflection here, and then Meg's reflection further in as well. And then also this one, which I also really love, that Meg took, where she was up against the mirror to get this reflection. And as some of you may remember, I said this is like the worst possible thing you could ever put on Instagram, because Instagram will create a square in the middle, which would actually, where you would lose the subjects. And yet, for all the fact that I usually say bring the subjects close together, what I love about this photo is the fact that they are occupying either end. It gives it a definite kind of feel to it that you wouldn't normally expect. So congratulations to Meg for those. I did want to show you those ones as well. it's quite handy being able to take Meg along sometimes when she can do these behind the scenes photography. Oh, Robert's gone, wow, you really did do a lot of editing with the walls and hair. You tell me about it. Oh, and you like the moving furniture bit. Right, okay, so that's what I wanted to show you with that. Stick around. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to... John Smith sent in an image. I'm going to give him a little bit of feedback about that. And then I'm going to tell you about what I'm going to be doing next week and a challenge that I'm then going to be setting as well. So, stay tuned. Meanwhile, just to let you know, I mean, if you find these podcasts useful, interesting or entertaining and you would like to support them in any way, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is definitely one of the ways you can do it. And don't of course forget to invite your friends along. If you know other people, whether it's members of your camera club or friends that you've got, people you like to go out and do photography with, or even people you've met online who you also know, if you belong to any kind of online camera forums or photography forums or anything like that, then also feel free to spread the word. I mean, let's grow this wonderful little community of ours. Okay, so what we're going to do now is talk about, we're going to move on to the critique or feedback section. And a little reminder here that this is one of the very few places online where you can get decent, reasonable feedback, where nobody's going to criticize you to a point where nobody's going to humiliate you. But you will also get honest feedback. I'm here to help. I'm here to help you improve your understanding of photography. And while I can talk about general shoots that I've done and general ideas of what the advantages of a wide angle lens over a zoom lens or a macro lens, you learn the best when you can get direct feedback on one of your own photos. So we have the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group, but you can also, if you don't belong to Facebook, you can also email me directly, kim@kimayres.co.uk. Send me your image, let me know what your sticking points are, let me know where your difficulties are, let me know why you're wanting feedback on it, and I will do my best to help. Right, oh, Meg says, thank you very much, Dad. You're welcome, Meg. Right, okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to John, and John sent this image here, and John said, here's an image, I would like your comments on how I might improve my studio work. So I felt sort of slightly vague because studio work is a big topic. So I sent back to John. I said, well, do you want to tell me a little bit about what your sticking point is, where you're struggling, where you want the help? And he said, well, now here's the thing, Kim. I'm very pleased with the image. I just wondered if you were presented with it, how would you improve it or change it? So I said, well, okay, give me a bit more detail about the shoot, why you were taking it. And he says, the shoot itself was one-on-one. The model is my granddaughter's friend and it was her first shoot. The main reason for the shoot is in fact that I really enjoy portraiture and studio work. And I suppose my question is, does the lighting look okay? The lighting itself was continuous, Pixar Pro 200. So John's using a continuous light system rather than flashes, which is what I'm using. And the advantage of continuous light is what you see is what you get. When you look through the lens, you can see exactly where the shadows are falling, how the light is reflecting off surfaces or anything else. With a flash, you have to go click, and then when it's gone flash, then you have to see where the light fell. Now, over time and experience, you get a pretty good understanding of where the light is going to go. But you still have to take your photo, take a look, and then actually I need to adjust this, move that light here, or put less power on that. But if you have a continuous light system, then you can see straight through the lens straight away whether the shadows are falling where you want, whether the highlights are blowing out, or anything like that. And I suppose the final question is, could the lighting be improved? So what we have then, we've got this photo and it's a homemade studio setup. We've got John's granddaughter's friend, and she's taken up a position and it looks like a sheet or a blanket of some kind that's been placed behind her. So there's a number of things here, John, that strike me. The first is, actually, just quite simply, there's not a lot of dynamic range in this. It feels like everything's sort of been pushed into the middle with the greys. So if let me just open this with Photoshop for a moment. And I'll close that one there. And just quite simply, the thing to check, if you're ever not sure, go to your levels, click on your levels, and you'll see down here that there's actually a great big chunk over to the right here, which means you're not going up into the highlights enough. So if I drag that up to where the histogram starts coming up here, I can drag that up, and immediately we've got a slightly brighter image. Now, if you decided you only wanted her brighter, you didn't want the background brighter, then you can mask that. If you're using Photoshop, the white will keep the layer the same, black will show the layer below. So if I put a black on there, and then I can shade that bit back in, or I can select her and just lighten her up. So that's one thing to do. Just note, first of all, that you've got a particular dynamic range here, which you're not really using. The second thing here is the notion of, well, it's a tricky one. I was going to separate these things out, but in a way they don't separate out. There's a thing of, what's the story? What's the purpose of this photo? And to me, it's not completely clear. You've got a young woman sitting down on her haunches in front of a white blanket. Why? And to me, it looks like a photo of a young woman sitting on her haunches in front of a white blanket. It's not telling me anything. Now, I suppose there's a couple of, if she was in a particular background, then so what other clues have we got? What elements have we got here? So we've got a young woman. She's wearing shorts, some sort of crop top, sandals, sunglasses. So it's a kind of summer look, but there's not a sort of summer background. She's also got, let me just zoom in here, she's got a few tattoos as well by the look of it. She looks like it's kind of dog tattoo there, some kind of ghost on roller skates. Looks like she's got a butterfly up on the arm. Is that giving us anything? She's got sunglasses, reflected in the sunglasses, looks like the roof and eaves of a roof of the building's probably out of the window. So that again is just saying that you're in a homemade studio. And what's really saying it's a homemade studio is the way the shadows are falling and the way we've got folds in the blanket. So it kind of looks like what you're trying to do is emulate the kind of white wall, white studio, white cube style photography that I was talking about last week, except for the fact that with those ones, it was whited out. You weren't actually seeing folds and backgrounds. So one aspect of this is, if you like, on a technical level, which is you're showing the blanket, and what is to be gained from showing the blanket or the sheet. But that also ties in with the narrative, which is a kind of, what is the purpose? What's the point? Why is this girl sitting here, other than she just happens to be sitting there for you to take a photo? Now, it's a tricky thing here. It's a very tricky thing here, because to you, it might make a lot of sense. And I can understand your granddaughter's friend, you take photos. Hey, let's get Grandad to take some photos of you. You're wanting to have a photo shoot. That's fine. So you set up and you take photos. And you've done that. And then your concern is, did I get the lighting right? And if it's just for you and it's just for her, then that's fine. That doesn't really matter. As long as you're happy with it, she's happy with it, then that's okay. But if you're putting this photo out into the world for anybody else to look at, then you have to come at it from an understanding of how other people might be seeing this photo and what they're hoping to get out of that photo. And they are not this girl's friend's grandfather. they aren't coming out from the same place. So you have to then start thinking, how are other people going to see this? What do they need to get out of it? Why, and all through that Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres bit is the idea, I'm constantly banging on about the notion of narrative and story. And it's not some kind of esoteric thing. It's about the why. You show me a photo, what is it about this photo? What's this photo trying to do for me? In this particular case, I'm not sure what the photo is trying to do. Now, let's go then back to this idea of if you're going white wall photography. Now, white wall photography, like I did last week, has a different feel to it. So let's pull up a couple that I did last week. Now, in this case, the thing is with the white studio photography, it means that the background becomes absolutely unimportant. You don't want any distracting elements in the background, because what we're doing here is we've got a product shot. Okay, we are showing off the clothes. We are showing off the clothes, and the clothes go ping against this white background. And so if we were to see the curvature of the wall, if we were to see a skirting board, if we were to see folds in a blanket in the background of this, all these things would be distracting us from what we're trying to achieve, which is, hey, look at these clothes, aren't they funky? Or in this case, aren't they very 90s style kind of clothes that we were going for, right? Now, traditionally, a lot of fashion photography, the stuff, you might find in just an ordinary magazine, look at this floral dress, look at these chinos, look at this, you have a model. What the model is thinking, what the model is feeling is kind of unimportant. It's just they are a mannequin in order to hang the clothes so you can go, oh, that's what the clothes look like on a person. Who the person is, how they are feeling or thinking is utterly irrelevant. The only relevance is, do they make the clothes look good? Now, one of the slight changes that came in, especially in the 90s, when you started getting this sort of, the likes of Rankin and what have you, who were doing these kind of white cube style 90s photography things, where you're then playing around with angles and stuff like that, is you start overlapping with portraiture to a little bit. Now, the thing of portraiture is there to tell you something about the person. Okay? So a portrait is about the person. Fashion photography is about the clothes. Fashion photography, generally speaking, doesn't care what the model is thinking, only does the model make the clothes look good. Portraiture, the clothes are there to support the story of the person. What's it telling you about the person? Now, when we got into this style of photography, it's still fashion photography. It's primarily about the clothes, but we're overlapping portraiture because what we're doing is we're getting the models to look straight into the lens and throw an attitude. So the model is holding the clothes, but the model has also got an attitude, and that attitude is then adding to an overall narrative, an overall feel. That it's not just a case of, will these clothes look good on me, but if I happen to wear these clothes, maybe I can display that attitude too. It shows a confidence, or it shows, something like that. Or what we're doing, and as well as is we're playing with line and shape and form and composition. In a way, if you go along to life drawing classes, that's all about getting, your classic lines and trying to get your use of triangles, your use of diagonals, your use of leading lines. So another way of using a model is to practice your compositional techniques. Understanding leading lines, use of diagonals, things like that become really important, or become a really useful way of using models. And then when you come to combine all these, so that here we have this use of diagonals and leading lines, we have the use of the white wall, so that all the attention is brought back to the colours and the clothing, but we've also got a direct gaze with the lens, whereby we're creating an attitude. All these things combine then to create something much bigger than any one of the parts. Playing it around even further, you take that really wide angle lens, you go for that, I was showing you this one last week, where we're just really playing with line and form and again attitude, and there's a whole kind of thing going on. But even if you don't play around with that, this one is getting much more, this is a real hybrid, this is more portraiture than it is fashion. There's a level of fashion. Hey, she's got a funky jacket. But the fact that she is engaged directly with the camera, looking straight into the lens, and we are closer in, we're not really worrying about the trousers or the bottom half of the jacket here. This makes this more of a portrait shot in that sense. But we're using that notion of the white background for portraits. And I do white backgrounds for portraits quite often, or completely black backgrounds as well. The whole idea with a portrait and a neutral background is so that all the attention goes to the face. With a fashion shot, all the attention goes to the clothes. So, with all these things in mind, let's come back to your photo. It is neither a fashion shot, because we're not really seeing the clothes, nor is it a portrait, because it's not really telling us anything about her. She's hidden behind the glasses, looking off to one side. And it's the white wall kind of thing, which is really about product shot anyway, isn't fully working because we can see the folds in the blanket and the way the shadows are falling. But even if we put her in, even if we create a completely white background, so let's say I go here, I go, click on here, and we'll go select subject. So I've selected the subject, and then let's select inverse, and on a new layer, we'll just paint that white. So we now have her on an all white background. We might need to up those levels a bit because that's just looking a bit dark. It's still, what is it telling us? It just feels a little bit cut out. The problem is that the white wall, especially if it's not a portrait, is a product shot. And when you start doing a product shot of a young woman like this, you run the risk of moving into objectification. We're not seeing this person as a person. Now, in a fashion shoot, it's all about the clothes. This isn't really all about the clothes. In a portrait, it's all about the person. And this isn't really all about the person. We're not getting anything of a personality. We don't know who this person is. We're not getting a sense of attitude. This person isn't engaging with us or engaging in some other action which would show us something about her. You know, sometimes, I mean, you don't have to be looking at the camera. I've just very recently done a whole pile of artists at work shots, and they are working portraits. The artist isn't looking into or the maker, in this case she was a ceramicist, she isn't looking into the camera with some of those shots. She's busy shaping clay and porcelain. But you're getting that sense of a personality that's coming out. So we're kind of there. So there's another bit here where to change this, to give a different sense with this, supposing we were to take her and then put her in a different situation. She's got her tattoos, she's sitting there. On a white sheet, it doesn't look right. However, if supposing you were to transplant this and you were to put her in an urban setting with one of those fancy graffiti walls behind her, maybe that would work. Now, I don't know whether this might work. Let's just try this for a moment. First of all, what I'm going to do, let's colour her in. I'll go to Neural Filters, and I'm hoping that because I'm going to be connecting to the internet with these, that I've got an option here to colorize. So let's just click colorize. That will do. Okay, so let's click Photoshop doing its fancy things. We've now got a colour. I don't know whether the original colours were like this, but it's not bad. It's something funny going on with pink on the toes. That doesn't matter. But what we can also do now is I will just, let's make this bigger, right? Let's put her in an environment. Okay, so let's say we take this environment here. I'll just do that. But now what I'm going to do is we will go back to select subject. So we've selected her. And then I will select the inverse. So what we've got now is I've essentially selected the whole background. And I'm going to use the generative fill. And let's say we were to do urban graffiti. I think is it 2 F's and 1 I, or 1 F and 2 T's? Sorry, whatever. Anyway, you know what? Let's just hit generate and see whether it actually comes up with anything. Like I say, my slight fear here is that if this is because this powers through the internet, that it might actually cut out a little bit. I can already see my flow is giving me little red squares, so I'm hoping that I'm not going to lose anybody for too long. This is taking a little bit longer than I thought. This is the kind of thing that you should really do in advance. But I was thinking about it. But I do just want to kind of see what's going on here, John, to kind of give you an idea of how it changes if you change the background. There we go. Okay. So what I've done then, using the generative AI here, hoping that I haven't lost people through the connection on the internet, we've now got an urban graffiti background, something like this, and now we have a very different kind of feel. We've got she's now in a setting. And I'm not saying that this is perfect. I'm just using this as a kind of quick example to say that, if you're going to, so you've got this young girl, she's got tattoos, she's got, there's, even a little bit of shadow here. The AI seems to have picked up that it looks a bit like she's got sunlight kind of coming down on her. So there's a bit of a sort of sunlight thing going on here. That's pretty impressive, I must say, actually. But that aside, I think this then sort of kind of gives you a narrative. Ultimately, then, John, I think this is kind of what we're up against, is what you're trying to do is say, there's several different things going on. If you're talking about trying to create that white studio effect, then it needs to be white. Now, you can do that by, what I was doing was I was using, I had a big softbox just sort of slightly behind me to one side to light up the subject, and then I had two strong flashes shooting into the big white space behind. That lit everything up. Everything went white. That isolated the character. So you don't see the blanket background. But, so that's one part of it. That's how you kind of go about it. The other part of it is the trying to make sense of why somebody is standing in front of a white sheet. And product photography is all about removing distractions from the background so that your focus goes on to the product. And the product may be being fashion, or portraiture, where it's all about the person and the attitude. Get that right, and that's fine. But you run the danger if you put a person, and it's not about, if you put a person onto a white background, but it's not a portrait shot, then what is it? You're turning the person into a product, and that essentially makes objectification. Now, with fashion, that's kind of the purpose. The person is an object. The person is just a live mannequin. What's important is the clothes. But if it's not about that, if you're not showing off a product on the person, you're not showing off the jewellery, you're not showing off the clothes, maybe you're not even showing off the tattoos, then the person themselves becomes an object. And that's where you're kind of moving into this sort of slightly grey, dodgy area that I would say is worth understanding so that you avoid it. To you, obviously it's not. She's your granddaughter's friend. You probably have a good laugh with her, good, nice relationship. But once you remove that relationship, so anybody else looking at this photo, then I think you potentially run into that problem. So a very long explanation. I know I'm kind of talking around the subject a bit, but I hope that I'm kind of getting that across. I hope that kind of makes sense. I can see there's a few comments here. So let's see what anybody else is saying here. Okay, so Pat says, very pretty girl, I just don't like the pose, making the knees look a little distorted. April says, is there something called standard portraiture, where there is no story, like wedding pics and baby pics? Could this be that category? Well, again, wedding pics are a story. The story is the wedding. The story is and portraiture, the story in the portraiture is all about the attitude you're presenting. If you're doing a portrait for your LinkedIn profile, for your business profile, then you tend to have a different kind of expression and a different set of clothes than if you're doing a portrait for your Tinder profile, or for Facebook even. Or I'm sure a few years ago there was this meme doing the rounds where people had 4 different portraits, and they said this is, you know, your Facebook portrait, your Tinder portrait, your LinkedIn portrait, and your Instagram portrait. And they showed the same person, you know, one they're having fun and sort of being out there kite surfing, and another one they've got a suit and they're looking serious, and another one they're kind of trying to look a bit sexy. Different portraits. So a portrait very much has a narrative. And as a portrait photographer, the first thing I ask is who's going to be looking at this photo and what story do you need them to take away with them? So if I'm doing a portrait for somebody and this is to go on the cover of the corporate accounts and they are supposed to look like a CEO, and you know, then that notion of strength, of command, of because the words are escaping me, but you know what I mean. That sort of, here I am, I own this space, and I know what I'm talking about. Confidence. That becomes absolutely primary. Whereas if I'm doing a portrait for somebody who is running a cafe, and it's like, come to our place, have a nice cup of tea, lovely bit of home baking, then you're going for a very different. You're going for a warm and a friendly, and so how the portrait is going to be seen by other people has a huge impact on the narrative that you try to create, from the lighting, the clothing, the background, especially the expression on the face. So there is no such thing as a kind of a neutral as such. There's always an agenda of some kind. And what you've got to do is understand what that is and then work it to your advantage, put all the bits in place to enhance the narrative you want, or detract or move away from any narrative elements that you don't want. So I hope that makes sense. What else have we got? Sandra says, love the girl in the jazzy dress. John says, the idea of the story is fascinating. When I think of why I took this shot, it was about presenting the girl favourably. Okay. April says, interesting shots. She does like the pose. John says, Kim, adding the background absolutely shows the benefit of the story. Sandra says the girl looks great against the graffiti background. Pat also says works with the background. John says, thanks, Kim, best feedback I've ever had. Oh, that's good to know. And April says, I understand. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, so superb. So bit of a long blether there, but I think it was quite an important bit to go off on. Right. So thank you very much, John, for sending that in, and for I don't think I've really talked about it in that way before. So I think that I've been mulling over this for quite a while since you sent in the photo. So it's helped me to really formulate my thoughts a little bit more about that. But I can see that there's more where I need to kind of pin that down a bit more, I think. However, that was greatly appreciated. So thank you to everybody here who's been leaving comments, giving feedback. Thank you to John for sending in the image. Now, next week, let's go on to next week. Next week, there will be a space for 1 or 2 pieces of feedback. So get your photo in. Or if you have a specific question about a particular aspect of photography, or a particular, whether that's to do with a camera, or it's to do with a narrative, or it's to do with a particular genre or settings or anything like that, or you've got a specific photo you would like feedback on, then send it through to me as soon as possible. The longer in advance that I get it before the weekend, the easier it is for me to come up with something which is more likely to be useful for you. So you can either put your image into the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group, or email it to me, kim@kimayres.co.uk. But do tell me what your sticking point is, or what your thoughts are, or what kind of feedback you're hoping for, and then that will enable me to help you best. So, though I will have an option for that for next week, there are maybe 2 or 3 slots. But what I'm also going to be talking about, so is cinematic photography, right? Is how to have fun with this, because honestly, we are going to have so much fun with this, I think. Part of the thing is with photography, so much these days is on kind of Instagram, where everything gets square, that we kind of get reduced to this idea of almost square thinking. Our camera very often comes in a 2:3 kind of ratio, and so a lot of other, whether it's portrait or it's landscape, we kind of have this 1 to 1.5 or 2 to 3 style ratio. Cinematic is where you're going almost like a 2-to-1, and there's a couple of different cinematic crops and ratios you can go that change the mood and feel of a photo. Now, we've already been discussing some of these kind of Wes Anderson style things, but there's other things you can do. You don't necessarily have to do it with people. You can also do it with landscapes. You can do it with street photography. So I'm going to talk through some of these other ways of doing it. So next week then is going to be about how to introduce that notion of a cinematic element into your photography, not just Wes Anderson, but other styles as well. So we're going to have a lot of fun with that. And then at the end of that, I'm going to set a cinematic photography challenge. So for 2 weeks later, so 2 weeks after next week, then we'll be all hoping that everybody will want to take part, and then you'll be able to send me your images, and we can have a lot of fun seeing how different people have interpreted this notion of the cinematic challenge. So a lot of fun for that. Make sure you tune into that one next week. Right, okay, so that's us pretty much come to an end, I think. Let me just go over here, press, no, not that one, more that one. Thank you once again to everybody who's been a part of this, leaving comments, giving feedback, sending images and what have you, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care, bye-bye.